Well, in our qualifying round so far, 10 athletes have punched their tickets to the semifinals. From Pool A, Cassidy Shear, Mark Boakman, Adam Lethko, Tyler White, and Ben Nicely. And from Pool B, Matt Koger, Calvin Willard, Mike Forrester, Derek Knutson, and Grant Foreman. Today, in Pool C, 10 more athletes begin their quest to claim their spot in the semifinals. Hey, welcome to a 2021 STIHL Timbersports U.S. Qualifiers. Tommy Sanders here with Kevin Holtz. And Kevin, our virtual competition from around the country continues. It's very, very unique, but of course 2021, a very unique year. And right now we're into Pool C. 10 choppers and sawyers, of which only 5 will make it to the finals. We'll start today with the first 3 disciplines. Who are you looking at?
Well, I'm looking at 3 last names: Slingerland, Lentz, Koger. Those names are synonymous with lumberjack sports around the world, and we've got one of each in Pool C. So watch for those guys to rise to the top as we get into a really tough-looking pool here.
Very much looking forward today. Again, 10 competitors shooting for 5 spots. And this is, remember, elimination competition, tiered competition. The first tier is coming up now, after which we will lose 2 of our competitors. So let's get started. Let's take a look at how our 3-round competition is scored. In round 1, our 10 competitors will compete in 3 events: the underhand, the stock saw, and the standing block. Then only our top 8 advance after that round into round 2. In this round, they'll compete in the single buck and the springboard. The 6 athletes with the most points after round 2 advance to the final round. The remaining field of 6 survivors will compete in the hot zone. This unpredictable event will be the final competition to decide who moves on to the semifinal round, which certainly ratchets up the stress of making 3 complete and clean cuts within the allowed distance. So let's get started on this next segment of our journey to find the U.S. champion for 2021. This year's pool rounds are conducted in 4 different locations around the country in virtual matchups. Each contestant lays down their best time in each discipline against a competitor on a different stage in another part of the country. So let's kick off our first discipline of round 1 with the underhand.
Don't blink in the underhand chop. This is one of the fastest events in timber sports. The elite athletes will be hitting the log in less than 1 second per hit. They will chop the front half of the log using their $700 axe. After they cut the front half of the log, the transition to the back is seamless. In less than 1 second, the axe is into the back side of the log. A 2 and 2 pattern, removing the chips. Then when you get close to the center, you have to be confident. Using precision, accuracy, power, you will drive the log off. Seems dangerous, right? It's actually one of the safest events. And yes, they are wearing a chainmail sock protection underneath their shoes.
First of our 6 disciplines is the underhand chop. Let's get it going with a couple of New York athletes, Jesse Cutting and Chris Henning.
Jesse Cutting joining us from Paul Smith College back in 2017. Had a great run in the collegiate series back then. Chris Henning, a New York native as well. He's a virtual neighbor of mine back home as these guys wade into this white pine. Like what I'm seeing with these chips on the back, or excuse me, the first side of the log. They're now into the back side of the log. Chris Henning, a couple missed hits there on his first side. He's stepping in the top on his right-hand side. Just cutting around as well. Very deliberate hits. Henning, though, so far is running away with this. He's got to get to those bottom fibers. He's got a lot of wood down there. It's giving a little bit of trouble. It's still hanging up. Still hanging up. There it is. Chris Henning finds the last fibers in the bottom of that block.
So Jesse Cutting, official time 34-11. The heat taken by Chris Henning with a 32.85.
It was a little sloppy. It went good. It came off. Dog legged my cut. I was practicing that, and still happened. And could have went a lot better, but always could go worse.
Next heat, a couple of veterans. If you're familiar with STIHL Timbersports, Matt Bolton on the left, Jeff Skirvin on the right.
Yeah, and left and right, except they're in opposite parts of the country. Matt Bolton is on a stage in New York State. Jeff Skirvin, is being virtually brought to you from the state of Washington. Because of all sorts of concerns in 2021, we cannot bring everybody together all around the country, so we're running this thing in a more virtual format. And Jeff Skirvin is virtually running away with this underhand chop. Matt Bolton may have done a little more work. No, he didn't. Skirvin did the job. I was going to say Skirvin may have run away from the front side of that block, but he did clearly put in a good, clean front face. You're going to see a lot of our athletes averaging about 1 hit per second, and you can see Jeff Skirvin is right around that time. Matt Bolton just being a little bit more deliberate and sort of thumping into that block, not bringing the swing speed.
Well, Matt Bolton, official time of 32 seconds even, and Jeff Skirvin sets the time to beat at 28.60.
There was no power behind it, and it was off, so I had to re-hit that first hit, which, you know, I was just wasting time at that point. But yeah, overall I was happy, right? Yeah.
Well, here's one of these coast-to-coast matchups right now on the West Coast. In Washington, Cody Laban versus Dakota Robarge cutting in New York.
To your timber. 3, 2, 1, go!
All brought to you through the magic of technology. You may recognize that Robarge name. Wally Robarge, a competitor for many years, is semi-retired out of the sport, but Dakota is carrying on the Robarge legacy. Laban and Robarge both turning together around the same time. Dakota's actually a left-handed chopper. You're going to see him chop through this block, push it off the rest of the way with his right foot. There it is, a nice clean cut from Dakota Robarge, and Cody Laban right there with him. Robarge, 27 hits in about 27 seconds. That's a solid pace. Let's watch Laban on the left side of your screen here. As he makes his turn, one wild shot coming up. Didn't quite get settled in, and that might have been all it took. That could have been the win over Robarge. There it is. Came in wide to the outside underneath his right foot. Didn't really get him much out of that hit.
Dakota Robarge time 27.74. That's the time to beat. Now Cody Laban just behind at 27.98.
Yeah, that's my first cut in probably about a year. Got some stuff to work on there. My backside, I missed a couple lines, but other than that, I kept the axe moving. Thought it was an okay cut.
Here we go with New Hampshire's Billy Cornelius. He'll be going against a guy who has certainly emerged as a super top-tier performer in STIHL Timbersports in the last few years, Matt Slingerland.
And again, through the magic of technology, we are spread across the country here, New York and North Carolina, respectively, for these two competitors. Matt Slingerland has been so close so many times to winning that championship, but first he's got to cut his way into the semifinals and eventually the finals. This is step number one for Matt Slingerland. Gets it off cleanly, about 21 hits in 22 seconds. Billy Cornelius not far behind.
You know, wood seemed a little firm, so just, yeah, definitely a good knockoff, and, you know, got a good feel and feeling good.
Times are starting to fall, and here's why. Clean, technical, proper cuts. Matt Slingerland chasing his lines in perfect, working his angles perfectly, and disassembling the backside of that block.
Went all right. I missed a couple hits here and there, but it looked like it was going to be firm wood, and it was. So just tried to stay behind my hits and make a safe cut, really. Came off pretty good. I think I was 10 and 11, so I'll be right in it. Super excited to be back. Just glad to be competing again. I always love chopping this nice wood.
Billy Cornelius, respectable time, 25.32, but Matt Slingerland takes over the top spot with 22.23.
Stand to your timber.
They are our two top seeds in the underhand. We're about to find out why. Jason Lentz versus Arden Koger.
Arden Koger Jr., famous for swing speed, but I'm not really seeing that blaze right here, right now. This could be a little bit of qualifier mode, looking for a safe cut. Jason Lentz bobbles in the turn. That's going to cost him time, but look at the power that Jason Lentz brings. I don't know, he's 7.5, 8 feet tall, reaches way up there with that axe and rakes it down from the ceiling. A little bit of an anticlimactic finish from Arden Koger Jr., but he says that block is severed. You'll feel that under your feet. You can tell your one foot twists a little bit, the other one stays stationary. You know when that block is severed.
Old Fatty cut that log pretty well. Very tickled with that one. Wood was firm, but I knew it was firm, so I just wound myself up and I bounced and went as quick as I could.
Well, Well, both these guys, to me anyways, look like they're in qualifier mode. They're not gunning for a championship. They want to make sure they've got a good, safe cut in advance. They want to hit that single, get on base, and they'll run some more bases once they're there.
Well, the first of 3 disciplines is done, and the veteran Arden Koger Jr. takes the top spot, followed by Matt Slingerland and Jason Lentz. Coming up next, we put the axes away and are ready for side-by-side chainsaw racing. The stock saw is next when STIHL Timbersports continues. STIHL Timbersports is sponsored by STIHL, maker of a full line of gasoline and battery-powered handheld outdoor power equipment. Find yours at stihlusa.com. By the Duluth Trading Company, the official workwear of STIHL Timbersports. By Ace Hardware. Ace is the helpful place. And by John Deere. Nothing runs like a deer. Today, 10 contestants from 4 locations around the country have been matched and are competing in our virtual competition for a spot at the STIHL Timbersports U.S. Championship semifinals. Pool C Round 1 competition is underway, and Arden Koger Jr. sits atop the leaderboard. At the end of today's competition, the athletes in 9th and 10th place will be eliminated. We're ready for event 2 of 3 in round 1 of our knockout rounds. To tell us more about this next discipline, here's Dave Jewett with the Duluth Trading Company Discipline Review.
Stock saw, 2 competitors going head-to-head with identically tuned MS-661 chainsaws. After a 15-second warm-up, all 8 fingers must be crossing that line. On go, with speed, they retrieve the saw. With precision, they enter the saw into the wood, listening to the RPMs, feeling the saw cutting through the wood, severing that first clean disc. Then, the perfect transition, and again, with precision, entering the log for the upcut. Hopefully seeing 2 complete discs on the ground, and of course this 4-inch line remaining for a leading cut.
We'll start out the stock saw competition with another virtual matchup here. This is going to be Cody LeBon from the West Coast in Washington versus Jesse Cutting, doing his cutting in New York.
Also want to point out, though, even though these competitors are in different parts of the country, the wood has been shipped from the same location. They're running identical saws. Want to keep everything except for the operator as even as possible. On with a sizable lead. LeBon was really squeezing every ounce of power out of that saw. You could hear the RPMs drop off almost to the point of a bog. He was really pushing that envelope.
Yeah, Jesse Cutting's time 12.84 and Cody LeBon 11.77. That's about as much air in between 2 scores as you will ever see in a heat of the stock saw.
Mediocre. Middle of the field, you know. I'm hoping for that 4th or 5th slip in, you know. Or actually, I guess in this case, 7th or 8th slip in. So, yeah, feel pretty good. I'm pretty confident.
Time to beat 11.77. Here's another Northeast matchup. Chris Henning going up against Billy Cornelius.
Chris Henning, known regionally as Sam or Sammy, as in the Sam Squatch.
All right.
He is a he's melted away a few pounds recently, or the past few years, but he is still a mammoth of an individual.
He's an imposing person.
Stand to your timber. 3, 2, 1, go!
Billy Cornelius, very quick to the wood. See who's ahead at the switch. Henning, though, made it up big time through the timber. Oh, and too much pressure from Cornelius. I can hear that saw starting to get fat, starting to bog down a little bit. It's going to be a head shake there from Billy Cornelius. He knows that that is not going to get him very far. Unfortunately, more to the story for Billy Cornelius. Not only did he bog the saw out on that upcut, he also cut over the line. Went from a slow time to no time, 0 points, DQ.
So we just saw Billy Cornelius on the stock saw event, and unfortunately he cut over the 10-centimeter line, and that's a DQ.
Meanwhile, Chris Henning's time 11.65.
I was just really focusing on, I trained this event a lot. I was really focusing on putting the pressure in the small wood and letting it up on the big wood, and it worked out for me.
Well, here we go. Jeff Sturvin, the veteran from Clatskanie, Washington, going against in his first year competing for STIHL Timbersports, New York's Dakota Robard.
Dakota spending his summer as a lumberjack entertainer, chopping and sawing. Have mixed emotions about that for our competitors, because sometimes it's just a chance to build up bad habits. Other times, if you got the proper discipline, it's a chance to really hone your skills. Both of these guys really exceptional saw operators, synchronized sawing. Look at this. This is going to be a tight one, Tommy. Oh, it's going to be Skirvin in the end. Just finds that extra oomph to rip off the top of that cut.
Time of 10.95, the new time to beat set by Jeff Skirvin, 11.32 for Robart.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah, I felt good about it, man. I was a little slow. I hesitated a little bit on my start, you know, making sure I started, got a good thin start, but besides that, it was good. You know, saw around good and good pressure. It's like riding a bicycle. I've survived a long time on hot saw and stock saw. That's what my dad and I did. He was a motorhead, and so I grew up doing it, and that was our father and son time, was in the backyard running hot saws and stock saws. He said no motor, no fun.
Well, I'm pretty happy with that. I was pretty fast for wood, I think. Good transition. The cookies were a little smaller than I'd like, but I made 2 clean cuts and I was inside the line, so that's good for me.
A couple of veteran saw operators here coming up, Arden Koger and Matt Bolton. A pretty salty time set to beat so far by Jeff Skirvin, 10.95.
Yeah, Skirvin's an exceptional saw operator. These guys are as well. And we've been talking about a lot this year how we continue to move towards that euphoric perfect cut. The wood is the same, the saw is the same, and the operators are becoming more finely tuned every year. You hear just a little bit of fluctuation from one of these motors. I couldn't even tell who it was. Bolton is going to come out with the advantage here, though.
Yeah, overall I think it was a good cut. Had a slight bobble in the start there, kind of, if my hand wasn't in the right spot, but I double kind of hit the throttle and then got into it and kind of keep even pressure throughout. Had a good changeover, good up. So I think cookies, sometimes it's thin to win, so we'll see how it turns out.
Matt Bolton just misses Jeff Skirvin's time, a 10.97, 11.47 for Arden Koger Jr. Here we go, a couple of the big dogs, our top 2 seeds in the stock saw. Matt Slingerland going up against Jason Lentz.
I mentioned this in an earlier discipline, but in my mind, these 2 individuals are prime time. They are ready to take on that championship crown. This is maybe a good indication of what we've got coming up later in the season in semifinal final action. Got to get through these cuts though first. Look at the synchronized start on this bolt. Very quick to the wood. Slingerland though, just a little bit of a bog. I think he's asking just a little too much from that saw. Jason Lentz is going to take him down.
Fairly good. I got to the wood decently quick and had pretty good twitch. I got a little heavy in the first wheel, I think, toward the bottom, and then in the switch coming back up, it was a little heavy, but yeah. All right. Yeah, felt good.
You know, I'll keep working on it. It was a nice smooth run. I love the stock saw, so I had a bit of trouble on my first cut getting the weight right, but once I felt it out, I kind of figured it out a bit and went smooth on the upcut. So it was a mediocrely safe run. I was happy with it.
Yeah, they both needed to cut sub 11. They wanted top points. Doesn't happen. Jason Lentz's time, 11.12, 11.52 for Matt Slingerland. Jeff Skirvin, the veteran, takes the top time in the stock saw, followed so closely by Matt Bolton, both of the athletes in sub 11-second range. And after 2 events, that top time bumps Jeff Skirvin to 3rd in overall points, Arden Koger Jr. in 2nd, and Jason Lentz sits atop the leaderboard. Only the top 8 will move on to the next round with 1 discipline left to go. Billy Cornelius, Jesse Cutting, Chris Henning, and Cody Laban will be chopping for their competition lives. That is coming up next. But first, these athletes dedicate an enormous amount of time training for these STIHL Timbersports events. Even so, many of the athletes find time to give back to their communities. One of those athletes is physical therapist Matt Slingerland. Find out more in the Ace Hardware Helpful Profile.
I've done a lot of PT charity as far as pro bono physical therapy work. I actually did a Duchenne's muscular dystrophy camp in college a couple of years to help those kids out. We were basically, they can't move very well and they're getting to the end of their life. And so we help them go canoeing and go swimming and all that stuff. It was a really fun camp. You know, I've done things like that. It was mostly with physical therapy, though, is what I've done my pro bono work with.
Mount Gilead, North Carolina, one of the 4 locations hosting competitors for our first ever virtual competition. We have athletes coming from around the country vying for one of the 20 spots in the 2021 STIHL Timbersports U.S. Championship semifinals. Today, it's all about survival for these athletes. At the end of this round, the bottom 2 in points will be eliminated. Right, the bottom 4 athletes on our leaderboard sit dangerously close to that cut line as we head into our final discipline of round 1. The axes are back for the standing block. Let's see how we got our time to beat in the standing block. In the first heat, Dakota Robarge faced off against Chris Henning, and Robarge sets the pace with a time just over 24 seconds.
Stand to your timber.
So here we go with Jesse Cutting on the right, Billy Cornelius on the left.
Both of these competitors actually in the Northeast competing in New York State together as opposed to our cross-country virtual event. Cutting with a wide open front face. Cornelius a little bit of a rougher go, but he seems to think he's got the job done. Cutting just putting one more in the far side for insurance. Cornelius gonna look to drive near. There it is, there's that twist we like to see. Takes it off far. Jesse Cutting also searching for those last fibers.
All kinds of trouble for Jesse Cutting in a time of 35.50. That might do it for him. Billy Cornelius, 24.60.
A few sticky hits there, but overall the block cut better, so I just wasn't really prepared for it, but you know, hopefully it's enough to pull me through into the next round.
Let's watch Billy Cornelius and his exit strategy for this block. Drives far, comes back to the near. There it is, there's that opening up. You saw that the second to last hit that he made. It just twists that top, it just leans it over a little bit. That opens up those fibers on the far side for a clean finish.
2 West Coast guys getting ready to go in our next heat of the standing block. Washington State's Jeff Skirvin going up against Oregon's Cody LeBon. Time to beat 24.60.
Both these guys are starting. You can't see the front side of their chop too clearly, but you can get a good indication by the chips on the ground. You want to see those nice big slabs of wood as they are falling out of that tree. Here's the backside for Cody LeBon as he's dissecting a bit of a missed hit on the near side, driving down the block. Kind of sets him up for trouble. Can Skirvin reel him in? Cleaner cut prevails on the backside for Jeff Skirvin. Pull the lever on my recliner and assume my position is the armchair lumberjack. There's a wild hit at the top of that block, and that sets him up in rough shape. It throws off his rotation. He's lost that bit of wood that should be cut and clean, and it costs him at least a hit or 2, which cost him this heat to Skirvin. Those are the little things he's so close to cleaning up.
Jeff Skirvin, 23.99, takes over the top spot. Right behind him, LeBon, 24.45. 6 competitors have completed their final discipline in round 1, and Jesse Cutting and Chris Henning are sitting on the bubble. Their fate lies with the outcome of our final 2 heats in the standing block. 2 will be going home. Who will it be? We will find out when STIHL Timbersports continues. STIHL Timbersports is sponsored by STIHL, maker of a full line of gasoline and battery-powered handheld outdoor power equipment. Find yours at stihlusa.com. By the Duluth Trading Company, the official workwear of STIHL Timbersports. By Ace Hardware. Ace is the helpful place. And by John Deere. Nothing runs like a deer. Tralia, Washington, one of the 4 locations hosting competitors for our first ever virtual competition. We have athletes competing from around the country vying for one of the 20 spots in the 2021 STIHL Timbersports U.S. Championship semifinals. We're headed into our final 2 heats of our final discipline in round 1. Billy Cornelius, Chris Henning, and Jesse Cuttings are all in jeopardy of being eliminated. All right, 4 heavy hitters in our next 2 heats of the standing block. This is Matt Bolton, Arden Koger Jr.
We see Arden Koger wading into the front side of this block, as is Matt Bolton. Again, we're bringing you these 2 competitors virtually. One from the Mid-Atlantic region in the form of Koger. Matt Bolton coming to us from New York State. Watch for Koger to drive big timber here. He's already cleaned well out on the near side. There he goes after the far. Bolton just one hit behind him, slightly into the stump. Had to kind of get high on that thing, stand on his tippy toes to drive it off. There we see Arden Koger Jr. around to the back of the block, clearing out chips, working near to far, opening up that line of sight. A nice conservative cut, not driving a pile of wood, but getting the job done.
Well, Koger got trimmed by Bolton in the stock saw, but gets a little bit of revenge right here. 21:33 official time for Arden Koger Jr. and Matt Bolton at 22.14. Well, here's our final heat of the standing block. Jason Lentz sitting at the top of our points, and Matt Slingerland currently in fourth. Both of these guys essentially a lock to move on to round two. Kevin, I'm sure you feel pretty good about their chances to advance to the semifinal.
Well, both these guys, Tommy, again, are high on my radar. I'm expecting them without too much issue to move through into semifinals and the finals, again, barring catastrophe, and they are, in my mind, both well overdue for a championship. Look at Jason Lentz just driving off a disgusting amount of wood in that standing block. Oh my gosh, everyone else is in the mid-20s, starting to flirt with the low 20s. Matt Slingerland, a great cut around 20 flat. Jason rips it off in the 16s.
Yeah, beat the time to beat by about 4 seconds, plus Jason Lentz with a 16.05, Matt Slingerland 20.17. And that performance is our John Deere power play. Nothing runs like a deer.
Going back to take a look at this run from Jason Lentz, puts a bit of a short face in here. I think he knew he had a good block, or maybe it was just a bunch of missed hits, but either way, he made it work. And again, he shortens up his face. That's less resistance to lift the chips out, punches it in the guts, and I think the block was just terrified and fell apart.
After being off a year, the nerves are still a little antsy. And the underhand there before, I didn't chop so good. Stock saw helped out a little bit. It's all, wood chopping's a lot of a mind game. It takes me a little bit to get the nerves out. Still a little disappointed in the first event, but the last two seemed to have went pretty well. So.
And now as we look at our steel points after 3 disciplines now, we're going to have to say goodbye to the guys in positions 9 and 10. That's going to be Billy Cornelius and Jesse Cuttings. As you can see, Chris Henning and Billy Cornelius are tied, but the tiebreaker goes to the competitor with the lowest overall time in round 1. So join us next time where we conclude our Pool C competition and decide the 5 competitors who will move on to the semifinals. For Kevin Holtz, I'm Tommy Sanders. We will see you then.